Well, it's a cold day in January here in Ohio, so we're stuck working in the garage. This is going to be the first in a series of build instructions or how I put together my solar glass tube oven. And this is something that if you're interested in doing for yourself, hopefully these instructions will be very helpful. We're going to go ahead and start, but we're going to get kind of a slow start. This first part is going to be more waiting than anything, and I'll kind of explain why. The first thing that you're going to need, obviously the heart of this project is going to be one of these right here. This is a solar evacuated tube. And what it is a glass tube. And it is, since it's glass, it is somewhat fragile. But this is a tube that's specially designed. It has a coating, kind of a metallic coating on the inside, and it also has a layer of sun absorption material on the inside of this glass. What this is, it's actually a vacuum tube, kind of like the old tubes that used to be in TVs and radios many years ago, but a little different. It's actually 2 layers of glass, and there's air captured between the 2 layers that forms insulation, and it allows the inside of the tube to get extremely hot while the outside of the tube stays whatever the ambient temperature is outside in the environment. This is a blown glass tube. There are machines that blow air into hot glass, just like the glass blowers build or blow different decorative shapes and glasses and other things. That's exactly how this is done, but with a machine. You'll notice some metallic pieces inside, and that's part of the manufacturing process for these that help when they blow these glass tubes. This helps keep the layers of glass separated. You can hopefully see the coating on the inside. It kind of looks like copper. I'm not really sure what the metal is, but it's some type of a metallic coating that is on the inside. So it's very, very shiny. Now a little bit of history on these and where you can get these. Solar tubes have been used in the solar hot water process for years and years. As a matter of fact, this is a solar tube that's designed for making hot water. These have been around for, I'm going to guess, 30 plus years. Maybe even more, but normally you see these are about 4 feet long, and you see them either on rooftops of houses or attached to the side of buildings, and they normally have a copper tube that goes down into them. Water will run through another header type tube that's attached to the copper tube that goes into this, and this simply absorbs the heat from the sun. The heat rises up the copper tube that's on the inside of this, and then it heats that header or the manifold that the water runs through to produce hot water. Now these tubes, they're highly, highly efficient. They even work on cloudy or overcast days where a typical solar collector doesn't really work. Even though this is a smaller tube, it's made exactly the same way that this larger tube is made. Now, something to just be very cautious of with this tube is, since it is a glass tube and it's blown glass, when the glass is closed off at the end of the manufacturing, it forms kind of a teardrop shape on the very end. Now, that teardrop shape, if you were to break that off or bump it up against something, this entire tube will just explode or maybe implode instantly. It will just become a million pieces of glass. So that is something that we have to be kind of concerned with as we make our solar oven project. As I mentioned, these are made mainly for producing hot water. People have used them for cooking though, and you can find online, there are a couple manufacturers that make very small sleeves that slide into this tube. And since this tube and this tube work exactly the same, the inside of this tube will get very, very hot while the outside remains the air temperature. But with that piece that slides in, or the tray, you can put small food like, say, a burrito or a hot dog or anything that's tubular shape, maybe French fries or something. You can put in a tray, slide it in here, and these type of tubes will cook exactly the same. Just a quick note on safety. While you're working with these tubes, you want to be careful. These tubes are very round. They will roll off your table. So I do have a couple of 2x4s over here on the side of my table, and I'm going to set this tube between the 2x4s just so that that tube doesn't take off and roll off the table. I suggest when you're working on your project, do something similar. These tubes right here are about $10 each. You can pick them up on eBay or Amazon, and normally you have to buy them in packs of 10, but they run about $10 each. Now this tube is a little bit different. It was not designed for heating water, although you can heat water with this. This was designed primarily for the purpose we're using it for. It was designed for cooking in. And so tubes like this were made, just for this purpose. And there have been several manufacturers that have come and gone out of business, and the tubes are still around, and there are manufacturers that still produce them. As I mentioned before, with that small tube, you saw that little teardrop on the end. With these tubes, because of the fragile nature of that, the manufacturers will take a piece of plastic, and it's just a cap that sits over that teardrop and it's glued in place. So this tube is not as fragile, so you don't have to be as concerned with the small tube. Now, it is glass. You still have to use some caution, but you don't have to worry about that so much. Just do not remove this end, because then you are going to run into the same type of situation. So where can you get these tubes? I'm going to post in the description of this video down below. I'm going to post the link on eBay for the place that I bought my tubes. Now, there are probably other places available, but there are a lot of tube sizes that are out there, and it is important, if you're going to build the oven that we're talking about today, and you're going to use the 3D printed files that I'm going to provide you with, it is important that you go with exactly the same size tube dimensions. Otherwise, all bets are off. What you end up with may not fit in the pieces and parts that we're going to put together. I will post the eBay link down below. Now, it is going to be an affiliate link, since I'm taking the time to share this project with you and I'm giving it to you for free. Hopefully you'll use my affiliate link, and I'll make a couple bucks off of every tube that gets sold on eBay. The guy that you're going to buy these tubes from, that's the only affiliation that I have. It's with eBay. It's not exactly with that individual. So if you find another place that you can buy the same size tubes, then go for it. Buy them wherever you can get your hands on them for the best price. Now, speaking of price, these tubes, the guy that I bought them from sells them in packages of 2. Now, I tried getting them just one at a time, and he just doesn't sell them that way. So you are going to have to buy 2 of them, which means you're either going to have a spare tube available, or you're going to be able to make a couple of these and give one to a family member or a friend. I actually bought 4 of them. I'm giving 3 of them away to family members. I thought it would be a fun project that everybody would get a little bit of usage out of after they're made. So I'm going to put together 4 of these ovens, and hopefully people will enjoy them as much as I will. The costs for buying 2 of these together are going to run you about $120. And so that about $60 each is what you're going to pay for each of these tubes. Another note, I am going to make this an open source project. I'm going to be giving you the files and all the details you're going to need to put this together on your own. I don't care what you do with these ovens after you make them. If you want to sell these ovens, if you want to just give them away, do whatever you want with them. The only thing that I ask is anything that you do, if you make any modifications, you share those modifications back with me so that I can post those to anybody else who's downloaded these files and these plans from YouTube so that others can benefit from this open source project. The only other thing that I ask is on some of the items that you're going to 3D print, on this main part, the tube holder, I did emboss, or I have some raised letterings that have my name. It says Stockton Solar Oven. Just give me the credit for putting this project together. If you're going to modify this, but don't remove my name, please. That's the only thing that I ask, and otherwise you can do whatever you want with this oven after you put it together. So reviewing my notes here, so that's the details on the tube itself. Now the next thing that you're going to need is, I've referenced a 3D printed part. So you are going to either need to own your own 3D printer, or you're going to have access to somebody that has a 3D printer who's willing to print some parts for you. So this is the main part that we're going to be talking about. This is the main tube holder. This is something that I designed in a CAD program known as Fusion 3D. And you can download on a website that's called thingiverse.com. I'm going to give a link to this part also down in the description below in this video. You're going to download the files. You're going to load those files into the 3D printer, and it's going to print these parts out for you. Now, if you don't know anything about 3D printers or 3D printing yourself, hopefully you've got a friend or associate, coworker, somebody who knows a little bit about 3D printing, who's willing to print some parts out for you. Now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about 3D printing myself at the beginning of summer. When I came up with the idea of putting this project together, I went out and I bought a 3D printer. I learned how to use it, how to design parts on my own. And so now we're in January. And so this was something that I put together on my own. The 3D printer that I bought was a very, very common low price printer, in I'll say mid-range printer. I bought an Ender 3 Pro printer, and that printer, I think I picked it up for about $179 on sale. On top of that, the filament, the plastic that you make your parts out of, that is a thing that feeds into that printer, that you're going to need. It runs about $20 a spool. You can pick that up at any computer supply store that sells 3D printer parts and supplies, or you can pick those items up on Amazon or eBay as well. For the $175, I figured I'd get a lot of use out of the printer. I'll be able to use it from now on for other projects. So I thought it was a worthwhile purchase. And honestly, for what some of these ovens cost, I was able to build this oven and pay for the 3D printer, and I'm still below the cost of what one of these ovens, a professionally built oven, would have cost me, and I still have the 3D printer to make whatever I want to make going forward. As I mentioned, the heart of this project is one of these glass tubes, and obviously you're going to need something to hold the tube, and that's where this tube holder comes in. This tube holder is made out of PLA plastic, or PLA plus plastic, and that's what my 3D printer uses. It's designed specifically to fit this tube. The tube simply slides into the holder, and you'll have a holder on both ends of the tube, obviously. And then at the top of the holder, you'll simply insert a bolt. I'm using a 2.5 inch quarter 20 bolt with a hex head. And I've made a recessed, hopefully you can see that. I've made a recessed pocket that when this bolt slides into, it is kind of a tight fit, but it'll slide right through there. The head of that bolt will recess into that hex head pocket that I've designed into the holder. On the other side, you'll simply put a 1/4 nut, and in addition to the nut, I did also 3D print some thumb screws to make it more convenient so that when you put your tube in, you can slide the bolt through and simply use the thumb screw so you don't have to, while you're out in the field, if you make any adjustments, you don't have to carry a wrench around with you. Simply use the thumb screw with the captive nut inside of it, and you're good to go. Talking a little bit more about this part here and a little bit about the tube. Now this tube, as I mentioned, the dimensions are important. This particular tube that I'm using is just under 23 inches to this plastic tip. Just under 23 inches. I think it's like 22 7/8 or something like that. The outer diameter of the tube is 4 7/8 inches. The inner diameter of the tube is about 4 1/4 inches. And like I said, that'll come in, it'll be very important as we add our different parts to the tube going forward. So what you'll do is you'll need to print out 2 of these items right here, or have your 3D printing buddy print these out for you. Now, just a quick tip, since you had to buy 2 of these tubes, and if you don't have a 3D printer and you have to have somebody do it for you, maybe you can trade the tube and a set of the plans to your 3D printing buddy, have him print out the parts for you, and then give him the second tube. It'll cost you 60 bucks then to get your 3D printed parts. And if somebody has a 3D printer, they probably already have the knowledge to go ahead and print this for you. But a little bit more about this part. I do have, you'll notice there are a couple holes in this part here and there, and that's for some of the different parts and accessories we're going to add on later as we work our way through this project. If you're new to 3D printing, to 3D print this part, there are a few things you need to know in advance. You need to download the file, the 3D printing file that the 3D printer will use to produce this object. But then you also need to know a couple settings in what's called the 3D printer slicer to produce this with the same output or the same quality that I have here. With a 3D printer, there's something known as Infill. And Infill, this is not a solid part. There are some hollow places inside of this part to just so that you're not using as much plastic and to keep the weight down. Now, when you produce a part like this, the infill, you normally want to go with as low infill as possible because that'll make the part more lightweight. It'll reserve plastic. And it'll make the printing go by a lot quicker. Now that's something, this part does need to be durable because it is going to be flexing. This does move. When you tighten this bolt, it's going to squeeze, it's going to compress these two head parts together. And so you don't want anything snapping off in the arms of this or up here. And I say that based on some experience. Here, this is one that I made that I tried to produce a part that would print quicker, and I did not use a good enough infill. And when I went to put the bolt and tighten it, it snapped these top pieces right off. So with that said, a voice of experience, you're going to want to have whoever 3D prints this for you, or if you print it on yourself, do not use an infill of anything less than 50%. Now that is going to make your print go much longer in the print time. As a matter of fact, it took about 38 hours for each of these parts to print, and you need 2 of them. So that should tell you how long you're going to be waiting just for this part. So I would say go ahead, order your glass tube right away. I don't know how many the guy has in stock or how long he'll continue to sell them. So order your tubes right away and then start printing your holders. Now, the other things that you'll need to know, in addition to a 50% infill, I printed these with no support and no bed adhesion. Now, the support is something, anytime you have something with nothing underneath it, you have to have something to support it. For some small parts or some very, very large parts, support is needed. With this part, even though this part has nothing over top of it holding it up, just the process and the way that it was designed, you can print this with no support needed. It should cleanly print like this. Now, I did not print this in the lowest quality setting. I did print it in the middle quality, which if you use Cura as the slicer, 3D print lingo, I know. But if you use Cura, you're going to want to use the dynamic quality, which is the middle setting. So no bed adhesion, no support, with at least an infill of 50%. And so go ahead and start printing those out. Once you get them printed out, and you've got 2 of them, you're simply going to insert your tube in. You can see I've got the thumb screw and the bolts. Right now, these are simply the tube sitting on a very loose. All you have to do at this point is simply tighten up the thumb screws. Now, this is something that isn't going to be moved around a lot in time. Usually, once you get these set where you want them, you're not going to move them at all. So you really don't want to torque these down too much. You're not going to really torque them down you can't really over tighten them to a point that you're going to break the glass, but don't test me on that. I've not tried to see if the glass would break. But what you're going to do is just make them so that the tube fits snugly into the holder, and that it doesn't move around a whole lot. And the main purpose for that you don't want to move it around is when you're storing these in the storage case later on, you just don't want this tube sliding too much from side to side, getting jarred around. And like I said before, it's glass, it will break, and just anything you can do to minimize the risk to the glass getting broken is what you want to be aware of. So that's it. That's all for this lesson. Just a few parts to assemble. Once you've gotten these pieces, we're ready to move on to the next step. Now, before we go on to the next step, there is a couple other things that I want to mention about this part. Now, there are holes on the bottom of the part. I don't think I showed the bottom previously, but the bottom part is where we're going to insert the legs. And when we go to insert the legs, you're going to notice that the legs do fit loosely in this. That is by design, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on when we get into the next section where we're building our frame. So that's all for this lesson. Thanks if you've stayed with me this long. Thanks very much for watching. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. Click the link and the bell down below so you can be automatically notified when the next in this series of videos comes around. So this is Jim with Jim and Jenny, Ohio. Take care, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.